It's great to speak to you about that today. If you're listening to this, you were probably, or you or someone you know was injured in a car wreck in New York. And among the many questions that you have is, all right, if I do want to pursue a claim, how do I know how much it's worth? And, I could be really flippant about it and say, well, if you're awfully hurt, you're going to get a big case. But it's a lot nearly that simple. So I'm going to take you through the way I take my clients through when we discuss how you deal with the evaluation of a personal injury case in New York. Let's assume that, like most people who come to me, you are sitting at a red light or at a stop sign, minding your own business, and suddenly someone crashes into you from behind, and now you've been badly hurt. So number one, it was not your fault. Number two, it was certainly 100% the other person's fault. And number three, you've been badly hurt. Maybe you've had fractures, maybe you've had surgery of any sort. So now what do you do? And there isn't an easy answer for how we can evaluate the case or what it's worth because there are a lot of unknowns. Let's take you through how we do it. First of all, we need to know what the insurance coverage is for the at-fault vehicle. And the reason we start with that is, you would like to think that what difference does it make? My injuries are what they are. I should be able to go in and present my claim. And if I can't settle, let's go in front of a jury. And if a jury awards me a huge amount of money, I should be able to collect that. But collection, that's the key. And collection is really a measure of what is the available insurance coverage. And not all insurance is the same. So let's assume, for example, that this crash we talked about happened in Westchester County, just north of the New York City line. And the offending vehicle was a taxi cab that was garaged in Westchester. Well, in Westchester County and in all counties north of New York City, taxicabs only have to have $25,000 in insurance coverage. That's $25,000 per person, but no more than $50,000 per crash. So if you had the misfortune of being struck by a taxi cab in that sort of situation, look how limited we're dealing with in terms of numbers. You could be horrifically injured, but the taxi cab company is only going to be on the hook for $25,000 per person. And again, no more than $50,000 per crash if there are multiple people injured in your car. So on that end, you have to look at it and now take a step back and say, well, that's not fair. Why should it only be limited to $25,000? Can't we go after their assets? And the answer is we have to be practical because generally the person driving a taxi is not going to be somebody who's going to have a lot of liquid assets, large bank accounts, is very wealthy or not. So if you would sue them individually to try to collect from them is probably going to be, a total waste of time. There really is no there. And then when you try to say, well, what about the taxi cab company itself? Well, these companies tend to be structured in such a way so there is no big, deep pocket sitting there. So now you have to look at, all right, if I can't get any money from the owner, I can't get any money from the operator realistically, and I'm just looking at $25,000 insurance coverage. Now, what kind of coverage do you have? And that's what we talk about meeting in the host vehicle, in your car. If you take a look at your New York insurance policy, you see that the state has mandated there are certain limits of coverage that you have to have. By state law, you have to have $50,000 in what's called personal injury protection. And that'll cover various things like medical bills. It'll cover certain wage losses and transportation costs. And then it will also cover, at a minimum, $25,000 in uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. And briefly, what that means is let's assume that you were hit by a car and it was hit and run. You have no idea who they are. And that means the vehicle is essentially uninsured that struck you. Or you were hit by a car, you know who it is, but the vehicle was stolen and it was reported stolen. Or the vehicle that hit you really didn't have any insurance. So those are uninsured motorist situations. And now you could turn to your own policy, which a state minimum would be $25,000. So if you went out and you got cut rate insurance and you just got the cheapest possible policy, in that situation, you would have no insurance coverage to go after on your own. What I mean by that, you're hit by that taxi cab. And if there's only $25,000 available from the taxi cab, you're not going to be able to go against your own policy for any additional compensation. So you could be badly hurt through no fault of your own, and you're hit by a taxi cab outside of New York City. You could be very limited in your recovery. But now we could look at it a different way. What if you're now hit by a commercial vehicle? Now, those vehicles tend to have much more in insurance coverage. So, for example, if you were hit by a garbage truck, you were hit by a FedEx or UPS vehicle, well, you can rest assured there's going to be plenty more than 25,000 in coverage. And now, in situations like that, now we can start looking to what is the real fair value of your case? What are your injuries worth? Where and how are we going to go about doing that? But we always start with taking a look at coverage. So, the takeaway that you might have for listening to this is the first thing you really need to do is take a look at your own insurance policy. And if you're not sure about it, call your insurance agent and say, hey, what would happen to me if I got hit by a car that either has no insurance or had state bare minimum insurance? How can I protect myself? And there is a way you can purchase coverage and basically self insure in that event. So that if you did, and you have a really good insurance agent who's protected you, well, if you got hit by a junker or some sort of vehicle with only 25,000 coverage, you could potentially protect yourself up to 250, 500, a million, whatever the levels of coverage are there. And now you can make a claim against your own policy because that's what you have insurance for. That's what insurance is for. So it is something you should really consider. And of course, if you don't have an insurance agent, it's always good to speak with a local personal injury attorney. You can call me or anybody in your community, and we can answer how that should be. The other thing you can do to make sure that you protect yourself is that you always want to know whose car you're getting into. You don't want to necessarily borrow a friend's car. You don't want to borrow somebody's car. You want to know exactly whose car you're driving. And something else, just consider if someone's going to give you a ride, who are they? Make sure that they're the kind of person who's protecting themselves. Because look, no one wants to get into no one plans we get into a car, we're going to be involved in a car crash. But you have to just be careful about who you're going to accept a ride from and make sure that you know who they are because again, if you are injured in a situation, if you're injured in a car that is not your own, you're going to have to look to the vehicle's coverage for the one that hit you and the vehicle that you were in. So these are some of the things that we have to look at. Now, if you've been hurt, you want to know what to do, and when do you call a personal injury lawyer? Really, you want to do that as soon as you can. You're going to want to call us, and the call is complimentary. What I mean by that is there's no charge for speaking to me. Anything you tell us is confidential because you're seeking legal advice. It's covered by something called the attorney-client privilege. So what that means is what you say here stays here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the circumstances to you, what your law is, how the facts of your case would apply, and what we can do to make sure that if you are injured and it's somebody else's fault, how we can get the most compensation for you. And that's one of the ways that we look at in terms of how you can tell how much your case is worth.